I'm Candace Benji-Small. I'm one of the Core 2 and 2 instructors, and today I'm going to be providing a case study of utilitarianism, looking at the case of Memorial Hospital during Hurricane Katrina. So the setting for this is in late August and early September 2005, when Hurricane Katrina barreled into the Gulf and hit New Orleans. Memorial Medical Center had been built in 1926 in the lowest part of New Orleans. Because it had lasted through so many other storms, it was seen as a safe place. So when Hurricane Katrina hit, it still had about 250 patients, plus all the doctors and nurses and staff, plus about 2,000 visitors who came because, once again, it was seen as a safe place during hurricanes. And at first, August 29th, day one, Katrina hit and the hospital was fine. It lost power, but the generators kicked in, so it had electricity again, and everything was working just fine. Then the levees failed, and water flooded into the city, and as the powers that be saw the water circling the hospital and engulfing it, they realized that they were in trouble and needed to start evacuating people. So Tuesday morning, they came with a plan of who to evacuate. Babies and the people in intensive care were their highest priority, and they were also hopeful to get people who could just walk under their own power. So when the truck showed up for the National Guard, they put everyone who could walk into those National Guard trucks, got them out of the way, and then using the elevator, they took up the babies and the intensive care unit people on gurneys up to the roof where they could be taken off by helicopter. And the helicopter was exceptionally slow because it would only take one or two people at a time. So even though they spent all day getting people onto the trucks and the helicopters, they were only able to evacuate about 60 of the original patients. And by the end of the day, this was just exhausting work, and all the staff were really, really tired. Even worse, though, than at 2 a.m. that night, early Wednesday morning, the generators failed. Even though the generators were above water, elements of the system were much lower, and when the water hit them finally, they died. So that meant no more elevators, no more electricity, no more running water, no more air conditioning, which in New Orleans in August is a really big deal. It was pitch black, really hot. And because of the water in the lower levels, they made sure everyone was on the second level or higher. So the next day, they knew that the helicopters were coming back to take people, but they didn't have the elevators anymore. And this schematic shows you the layout. So on the left is the hospital. On the right is the parking garage. And they couldn't get people on the elevator up to the helipad. So what they would have to do is they would take them to where it says machine room. There was a hole in the machine room, and they would shove the patient through the hole into the garage. Then they had a pickup truck. They'd put the patient on the pickup truck, drive him up the parking garage to the top of the parking garage. But that wasn't the end of it. Then they would have to take the gurney and walk up 3 flights of these metal staircases up to the helipad. So it was not an easy task to get even one patient from the hospital all the way up to the helipad. And it was really just a miserable experience. It was over 100 degrees in the hospital. It was really hot. It was really humid. Nothing was working. And of course, without electricity, a lot of the medical equipment wasn't working. And so people who were running on ventilators, instead the nurses had to bag them by hand. And there were a lot of machines that there was no human equivalent. So people were sickening and dying right in front of the staff. So the doctors got together again and said, we're going to have to put together a triage system for tomorrow because we need to figure out who is going to get out of the hospital first when we start getting help again. And I didn't know this, you may not know this either, but there are different kinds of triage. And when we say triage, it says there's limited resources, who gets the resources. That's what's meant by triaging. And there are at least 9 different ways to approach this. One of the most common is to do it by acute need. And we see this in our everyday world in terms of an ER. If you go to an emergency room because you have a really bad headache, you are going to not be bumped to the head of the line. But if you come in from a car accident with life-threatening wounds or a heart attack, that person is put ahead of someone who has less serious wounds. So the greatest need gets the resources in that form of triage. A utilitarianism form of triage, though, says, how can we do the greatest good for the greatest number, and they focus on maximizing a good outcome. How can I save the most lives? And even that's complicated, because how do you decide that? In some systems they say, well, a younger person will probably live longer, so they would have more years. So someone who is younger should be saved before someone is older, just because if you add up the years, that's more life that is saved. And we see this most often in a war zone. And the doctors decided to take a utilitarian view when they were doing triage as to, when the help starts arriving next day, who are we going to evacuate first? And what they did was they got out pieces of paper, wrote a 1, a 2, and a 3 on each piece of paper. And if you were fairly healthy, then you got a 1. And if you were really sick, you got a 3. And if you had a 3, that meant you were going to be the last one to be evacuated from the hospital. And they put all the 3s into a second floor lobby to wait. And this is a picture actually from the New Orleans airport, because as you can imagine, there aren't many pictures of the hospital itself. But I think this does a good job of showing you just when we have triage situations, how they're very crowded and demoralizing, and it's not a pleasant experience. So no one was showing up. That whole day, no one showed up. And the only news that the staff members were getting was from the radio, because the internet wasn't working. There was no cell phone coverage. The phones were washed out. All they had was the wireless radios. And the radios were doing what news do so badly, is they were just passing along every rumor that came through. They were being told that there was rampant looting, violent looting happening in the streets, that people were getting killed in the streets. They were told that it was martial law and that the army was coming in and you better not be outside because you could be shot. There was one story about a shark that had been spotted in the waters, which turned out to be completely untrue, but that was reported on the radio as being just a factual item of, if you go outside, you could get killed by looters, killed by police, or eaten by a shark. So you have to imagine the setting now. It's pitch black. All the news is like the end of the world. It's 100+ degrees in the building, and no one has come, and you don't know if anyone is ever going to come to evacuate these patients. And the staff were freaking out. Staff were having nervous breakdowns. What were they going to do? They couldn't leave their patients, but was anyone going to ever come to help them? And then someone, they don't know who, someone said, we should put these people out of their misery. And there were two reactions. One, some people were saying it's humane, it's criminal to make these people suffer. And then there were people saying it's outrageous to even say such a thing. Day 4 dawns, September 1st. Dr. Anapu is seen walking around lobby 2, where all those number 3 people are, with a bunch of syringes. And she's saying to the people, don't worry, you'll feel better soon, and then injecting them. Most of those people were found later to be given an overdose of morphine or another sedative, which killed them. Here is Dr. Ewing Cook, who had a cancer patient up on the 8th floor. The woman was near death, and her medication had made her very, very overweight. There was no way they were going to be able to carry her down 8 flights of stairs, get her through the hole in the machine room, and then drive her up to the helipad. So he turned to the nurses and said, there's 4 of you working on this woman. This is not a good use of the resources. Go ahead and give her an overdose of morphine and then come work on other patients. Emmett Everett was a 380-pound man who had had a spinal stroke, so he could not walk. That's why he was still in the hospital, and he was too big to get through the hole. But he was conscious, he was alert, he had fed himself breakfast. That day he had said to the nurses, let's rock and roll. You tell me what to do, I will do it. He was found with a morphine overdose after the hurricane. So all these people were put out of their misery, and then later that very same day, help did show up. Boats, helicopters, enough help to evacuate all the patients and staff and visitors from the hospital. So my questions for you are to consider: how was utilitarianism employed in this situation, and how does it show the strengths and weaknesses of this perspective?